Creating these classes requires equipment and services that cost money. If you appreciate this education, please think about going to EliTheComputerGuy.com and offering a one-time or monthly recurring donation. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class, I'm going to show you how to self-study so you can learn programming on your own. For a lot of people out there, they would prefer to learn programming on their own for any number of reasons. Possibly they're already a professional. They're already an MCSE, they're already a CCIE, something like that, and basically they just simply know how to do coding in order to get job tasks done. There are other folks out there that simply want to learn a valuable job skill without having to pay, who knows, anywhere between $20,000 to $100,000 to go to college. And the reality is now is that you can get a very valuable job even if you learn coding on your own. Now, to be clear, if you learn coding on your own, you're also going to have to do other things to prove yourself to companies. You're going to have to do your own projects. You're going to have to work with like nonprofits or whatever, actually put something out there into the world so that people know that you can build something. But you can learn coding completely on your own and get into a valuable job doing that. And the final reason I would say a lot of people need to self-study to learn some coding is there are many folks out there that have decided they have that $20,000 or $100,000 to go to college or go to a boot camp, and they've decided, I have heard tech is the way to go. I want money. I want respect. I want to be impervious to layoffs. Whatever you think. But anyways, one of the problems is for a lot of folks is that many people out there are just not built to be coders and really are not built to be in the tech industry. As I've talked about before, it takes a special type of person to be a park ranger. When I say it takes a special type of person to be a park ranger, nobody argues with that, right? You have to want to be outside and in hot weather and in cold weather. You have to be willing to get bitten by mosquitoes. You have to deal with government shutdowns and all that kind of stuff. When I say that you have to have a special type of personality to be a park ranger, everybody goes, yeah, of course, Eli. That's just complete obviousness. But when I say the same thing about being a computer programmer, Eli, anybody can be a computer programmer. You're like, well, sort of, but not really. Right. It takes a certain personality type to be a coder, and especially to be a coder professional. If you're going to be doing this, the equivalent of 8 hours a day, in order to be successful in the career, in order to not lose your mind, you have to have the right mindset. Just like the park ranger has to have a specific mindset, so does a coder. And so one of the things a lot of people get into trouble with is they've got that $20,000 for a boot camp or the money to go to college, and then they throw that money down, and then they go, and then they get halfway through and realize it's not the job for them. Do remember, when you're dealing with boot camp recruiters, when you're dealing with a lot of these recruiters, the recruiters get paid when you sign the check, not when you get a job, not even when you pass the program. You sign the check, you get plopped into the class. At that point, that's when they get their commission. So they don't really care if you get a real job. Let's be honest, they don't really care if you don't even like the career field. The fact of the matter is that if they get you in a seat, they get their commission. So one of the good things is going out and learning a little bit of coding on your own. You get to determine, is this something that you are actually interested in? Go learn some PHP, learn some JavaScript, build some small web apps. Again, when you talk about building an application, we're not talking about an operating system. We're not talking about the next QuickBooks or something like that. You can build a small notification application that can actually do something very useful for you and then see if you enjoy it. So basically what I'm going to be talking about with you today is how you would go about self-studying if you want to learn to code. And again, especially for the people that have the money to go to a boot camp, I would really argue learn at least a little bit of code beforehand to verify this is what you actually want to do. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is the fact that you are not married to whatever programming language you learn. Let me be clear, you're not married to whatever programming language you're learning. So unfortunately, with a lot of people out there, they seem to have the feeling that you get married to whatever the first programming language you learn is, and then you're stuck with it forever. So I would say for a lot of folks, I think PHP is a very good language to start with. It is very easy to learn. There is a lot of material out there to help teach you how to do PHP. It's something that's actually used in the real world. So if you're dealing with WordPress, if you're dealing with a lot of open source web applications that are most likely built with PHP. So PHP is just one of those things. It's easy, like literally within a week, you can be deploying applications that might actually be useful to you. It's widely used, it's highly documented, blah, blah, blah. But I get so much pushback from people. I can't believe that you would tell people to learn PHP. And I just sit there and go, look, let's be clear. You're going to understand what variables are, how to set variables. You're going to understand functions. You're going to understand loops. You're going to understand if-else statements. You're going to understand switches. You're going to understand, if you get into it, frameworks and other things. Basically, PHP gives you most of the basic concepts you're going to be dealing with almost any other programming language. So if you spend a month learning PHP and then you realize, oh, this isn't doing what I need to do, then you can go over and learn Java or C# or something else. And when you go over to learn Java and C# or something else, you're already going to know what a variable is. You're already going to know about setting variables. You're already going to know about functions and loops and if-else statements and everything else. So when you learn that new programming language, it will be a hell of a lot easier for you. So it's very important to understand you're not married to the programming language. You can learn one programming language to learn how to program and learn how programming works, and then swap over to something else that may be more effective for you or may be more in demand. The other thing to realize too is that whenever you're going to be building applications for the real world, there's a good chance you're going to have to know multiple coding languages in order to make that application work. So one of the projects that I've been working on, or one of the things that I work on, is with these little Arduinos, right? So these little Arduinos, these are called microcontrollers. And so we're going to have more videos about this in the future. But I like using these little microcontrollers because basically you can turn these into sensors, or you can turn these into triggers for physical devices to turn on. So turning on fans, turning on lights, that type of thing. Well, you have to code in order to make the Arduino work. And in order to code to make the Arduino work, you have to use what's called the Arduino IDE. And basically it's a variation of a programming language called C. Well, here's the thing. If I want this to be built into an overall system, I have to code this with C. This can then send data to a server using something called a post, and then a programming language called PHP is what I use. That PHP language can then parse, basically read the post information that's sent from this Arduino in order to turn the values into variables. That PHP language then uses something called SQL, Structured Query Language, which is a language you use when you're interacting with things like MySQL databases, to then input that data into the database. Then, if I want some kind of report, so let's say I want a screen that does something that tells me, let's say, the temperature. So let's say I have an analog temperature sensor on here. Every 5 minutes, it sends the temperature reading to the PHP script. That PHP script parses what's being told to it. It then turns that into a value. It then uses MySQL, or uses SQL, Structured Query Language, in order to put that value into a MySQL table. Then, if I want a display to tell me what the current temperature is, I would then use PHP and MySQL to pull the value out of that MySQL table. I would then use PHP, and with PHP, I would write an HTML web page. So HTML is hypertext markup language. Is a markup language that's used when you're reviewing a website. So basically, if I want to be able to read this value in a website, I would use HTML. And then in order to make that website pretty, let's say add colors, change the fonts, do those types of things. So the website isn't just a text number on the screen, then I would use something called CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. So just for this simple project, just for a simple project where I have an analog temperature sensor on this device, I would need to understand how to be able to code in Arduino. I would need to understand PHP. I would need to understand SQL. And then on the other side, in order to view what is being put in by the sensor, I would then also need to understand HTML, and then in order to make that pretty, I would need to understand CSS. Now, if I was going to put a little bit more sophistication in there, be able to do like rollovers, menus, that type of thing, I would probably also need to know JavaScript. So a very simple IoT sensor, all that it's doing is taking what the current temperature is, basically dumping that value into a database, and then I'm then able to read that value by looking at a web page. That would require like 6 different languages in order to accomplish that task. So it's very important that you understand that you are not married to one language. If you learn PHP, that's not it. It's not. Well, you learn PHP. You got to live with it. You're a man now. You're a woman now. When you learn a programming language, you got to stick with it till the end. No. You can learn PHP or Python or JavaScript or COBOL. I don't know why you want to learn COBOL, but hey, you can learn COBOL. And then you could take what you have learned and then go and figure out what programming language is more valuable in your current area, and then focus on that. And as I say, regardless, when you're dealing with a lot of these coding projects, you're going to have to know multiple languages anyway. So please, when you're going out there, I see so many noobs and they get so frustrated. Oh, they spend so much time. They waste so much time like trying to figure out the right language. They'll sit there and they'll spend 2 weeks trying to decide between Java or Python or Swift or whatever else. And what I would say is stop. Take an hour, take 2 hours. Figure out the coding language you think is most appropriate. Start learning that. In 2 weeks of learning that, if you figure out, oh, this isn't really doing what I want, learn a different language. But that'll be 2 weeks where you have been learning something and overall you've gotten ahead. Do remember, most coding language is more or less the same. So if you learn something in Python, that will be able to carry you over into something like PHP or to Java or something like that. So please, you are not married to a programming language, so don't act like it. The next thing that I want to talk about is simply asking you, what problem do you want to solve? One of the big issues that I see with a lot of new people, especially a lot of young folks, is they come out and they say, I want to do computers. And that doesn't mean anything. It literally doesn't. We're not even talking about networking or sysadmin or coding or the other stuff. They're just like computers, right? And one of the problems that causes is that, again, different technologies solve different problems, right? They're literally built to solve different problems. A car is built to solve one problem. A tractor is built to solve another. A car has 4 wheels. A tractor generally has 4 wheels. A car has a steering wheel. A tractor has a steering wheel. But it doesn't mean a car is a tractor or a tractor is a car, right? Those technologies have specific purposes. The same is true with anything in what you would consider the IT world. Again, we're talking about networking, we're talking about system administration, we're talking about coding. These technologies solve different problems. Well, when you're dealing with the programming world, the same is true with different programming languages. Again, there are a gazillion programming languages out there. Some are live, some are dead, some are zombie, but there's a crap ton of them out there, and they were all designed to solve certain types of problems. Again, if you want to create iOS apps, let's say you have an iPhone, you're an Apple fan person, you just love iOS, and you say, I want to develop for iOS. Well, if you want to develop for iOS, then you need to learn Swift, right? That's about the long and short of it, right? If you're sitting there and you're thinking, Eli's talking about these IoT sensors, and if I could deploy 50 IoT sensors into my facility, I think that would be very valuable. By knowing what type of problem you're trying to solve, you can say, okay, well, I know I can do a little bit of research, and then I know that in order to make the Arduino actually function, I'm going to need to know the Arduino language. Again, it's a derivative of C. So I'm going to need to know Arduino. But in order to have the data that the Arduino is sending to a server parsed or interpreted, I'm going to need to know a backend language. And so that's when you can sit there and you can see, okay, maybe I need to know PHP as a backend language, Python's a backend language, possibly Ruby on Rails. Well, once you start to understand that type of thing, then you can narrow down on what languages you need to learn, right? So let's say you're already working in a company. And so in order to parse the post data, you figure, okay, I can learn Python, I can learn PHP, or I can learn Ruby on Rails. Then you go into your business environment and you say, hey, what knowledge base do we already have? We already have developers in our company. What are those developers actually already developing in? You may find out all of your developers are developing in Python, which may actually be the case. So then you can go, oh, okay, I need to learn Arduino and Python because I want a support structure. When I'm learning how to code, I want to be able to go to the next person's cubicle and say, hey, this function isn't working for me. Can you tell me why? If I learn a language that nobody else in my company uses, then it's going to be much more difficult to learn. If I go with a language my company is already using, Then again, most likely there's 10 or 20 people in my office that already are pretty good at whatever I'm trying to do. And so as I'm learning, I have somebody to go to and talk to. And then as I continue on, I can then, because I know what types of problems I'm trying to solve, I can then figure out what languages I need to learn next, right? So again, so if this is used in Arduino, it's talking to PHP. PHP is then using something called structured query language to dump this into a MySQL database. One of the things you might find out is, oh, under the load that I'm putting this on or whatever else, MySQL isn't working for me the way that I need it to work. And then you can go out there and you can figure out other database systems that might work for you better. And then you find the coding languages that are required for those database systems, and then you learn whatever that is. Again, it's very important to understand. A lot of new people in technology don't seem to grasp how simple technology is in many ways. And one of the ways that it's very simple is it really is paint by numbers, right? In order to code for this device, you need to know how to code in Arduino. That's it. If you code in Java, it's not going to work unless you have some kind of parser or something, right? It's just basically there are certain languages that do certain things and others that don't. And so if you know what problem you're trying to solve, it'll be a hell of a lot easier to figure out what language you should learn. So the next thing that you need to think about, after you have an idea of basically what type of problem you need to solve, is you need to go out there and you need to simply figure out what the requirements are for the technologies that you're going to need to use when you're implementing the solution to whatever problem it is. Again, a lot of people don't realize how paint by numbers things are in the technology world, but it really is paint by numbers, right? You figure out what kind of infrastructure you need or whatever else, and then you simply see what the requirements are. If we go over to the computer for a second, we can simply do things like basic Google searches to see what people have to say. So I did a simple Google search on how to create Android apps. And so again, a very simple overview of Android app development for beginners. You can come here and you can read through this and you can see the different things that are required in order to create an Android app. On the higher end scale, let's say you're doing more complicated IT related things, is one of the things that I'm very interested in is this thing called Azure Functions. So Azure Functions or Cloud Functions, this is a component of what is called serverless architecture. So basically, you can simply call compute the way you would have called APIs a couple of years ago. It's really amazing, like machine vision, voice recognition, all kinds of amazing stuff can be done through this serverless architecture. So for me, right now, I'm very excited about serverless architecture. So I sit there and I go, okay, Azure Functions has what I need in order to solve my problems. So now I just need to see what the requirement is in order to use Azure Functions. If you scroll down, you can see here supported languages in Azure Functions. And if we scroll down, we can see languages by runtime version. So we can see C#, JavaScript, F#, Java, PowerShell, Python, or TypeScript. Over here, this is for 1, 2, or 3, and so we can just simply see, okay, so C# should work for Azure just fine. JavaScript should work for Azure just fine. We go down here, Python has some things that we have to keep in mind. And so basically, this is just one of those things that you can do in order to figure out what programming language that you want to learn. So again, for me, I think Python is great, or I think PHP is great. I think it's a great way to learn coding. But if you know for certain you're going to have to be using Azure Functions for whatever solution you're trying to implement, then there's PHP is not here. PHP is simply not here, so you would not learn PHP to start with, because what would be the point, right? So for here, you would go through and you say, well, I'm not really sure about C#. Oh, look at this. I've heard Python. I know people in my office use Python. I know we use it for other projects. So since Python will work with the Azure Functions, let me start off with Python. This really is just the paint by numbers way of trying to figure out what language you need to learn. Now that we've talked about all that, the question then becomes, how do you self-study in this modern world? And I'm about to show you something. I'm about to show you something that I'm sure is just going to shock my longtime viewers. But one of the ways that I think is the best way to learn lots of different types of technology and coding, one of my go-to resources when I'm first trying to learn some technology subject, If you said dummies books, you would be correct. Dummies books are one of the most overlooked resources in the real world of technology. Oh, I know the kids. I know the kids and the noobs and the people that just, well, I can't say that because this is supposed to be family friendly. But I know a lot of people out there, when I pull out a dummies book, they just look at me and go, that only, that only proves how little you know. Well, here's one of the big issues. You know, one of the big issues in the technology world, if you're an actual technology professional, actually trying to get something accomplished, one of the big problems in the technology world is simply trying to figure out the small concepts with any new technology, right? So I think about this with things like Linux, or back when I was learning voice over IP. So back when I was learning voice over IP, I don't know, 16 years ago or something like that, I was fully certified in analog and digital telephone systems, 110 blocks and 66 blocks and all of that kind of stuff. But then when I started looking into voice over IP, one of the problems that I ran into is there were so many glossary terms I simply did not grasp. I didn't understand what was going on. There were so many, I mean, just incredible, like kindergarten level subjects in the material that I didn't understand what was going on. And so when I tried to learn about voice over IP back then, it was very difficult because I simply didn't understand the basic concepts. So then I could learn the larger concepts. Again, when you're sitting there and you're filling out a configuration screen, or you're typing out some kind of configuration script, you have to know what you're trying to configure and why and how it's supposed to communicate and all that kind of stuff. So that's the thing, is a lot of people try to jump into the configurations, the big things, but if they don't understand the small concepts, then the big concepts are going to be very difficult. So one of the things that I absolutely love about dummies books is dummies books are the types of books you can grab, and you can spend anywhere between, I don't know, $20 to $40, depending on what dummies book it is. And basically in an afternoon, you can read the dummies book and you can get an idea of what is going on with whatever technology it is that you're trying to learn. Again, whether it is a programming language, whether it's Linux, whether it's a new version of Windows. Again, a new version of Windows Server 2019 comes out. You're like, I wonder why I should care about it. You grab a dummies book if they have it, and you spend the afternoon reading the new changes to Windows Server 2019, and you can go, oh, okay, I care about this, so I will then go and learn more, or I don't care about this, on to the next subject. So one of the big things that I would really have you think about is again, going out, PHP, Python, JavaScript, HTML, all these different languages. There are dummies books on it. You can go on Amazon and simply be able to purchase them relatively inexpensively. If we go over to the computer, I can just show you a couple of things with books like this. So if we take a look here, we can see we got a dummies book, Android app development for dummies. Now again, is this going to teach you everything you need to deploy an enterprise class Android app? No. But if you go through here and you look at the different chapters, it tells you about prepping your development, creating your first your Android project, coding your application. Basically, it shows you all of these basic little things and gives you the overview. So then you can go to more sophisticated sources to learn more about how to actually build the app that you want to create. Now, one of the things that I will warn you is whenever you're going to be looking at books, one of the problems with books is that books stick around for a long time. They stick around long after their expiration date. So especially if you go to Barnes & Noble, or if you go to, I guess Borders doesn't exist anymore. So if you go to Barnes & Noble or a bookstore, one of the problems you can have is they may have books, dummies books or whatever else, that are previous editions. So with this one, it's the third edition. And this particular one was written all the way back in March of 2015. So depending on what coding language you're trying to learn, that may be a problem for you, and you have to be careful about this. So that's one of the things like with Python. So Python has been through a couple of versions. There was a major change between version 2 and version 3. So if you go to the bookstore, go to Amazon, and you buy a how to learn Python book, for dummies, and it's for Python 2, you may run into problems simply because things have moved on to Python 3. So if you are looking for books, do be careful about that. Look at when the publish date was and look to make sure that you're purchasing the current version of it. This is one thing I would never or almost never buy technology books out of the bargain bin at places like Barnes & Noble. Like, oh, look, this how to program whatever is only $1. The reason it's $1 is because it's been sitting on the shelf for 8 years, and everything you're probably going to learn in there is more or less obsolete. There are other book companies out there. Again, you can go to places like Barnes & Noble. Even if you don't buy the book at Barnes & Noble, go to Barnes & Noble, see how the different publishing houses write their material, and see whether or not you like it. One of the companies that I like is Visual Quick Start Guides. I've used these for a lot of different programming languages. I actually use these as the basis for some classes in the past. And so again, they've got HTML and CSS, they have Python, they have PHP, they have a lot of other coding languages, and I find these books to be very good. So really think about, if you're going to learn how to do coding, think about going to books, think about going to the simple, books for dummies, books for idiots, whatever else. Especially in the beginning, this gives you a very good foundation so that in the future, you know what direction to go in, and when you're learning about more complicated subjects, you have a good basis to be able to build from. So let's say you just can't do it. Some people just can't do it. Some people, they are too embarrassed. They would never pick up a dummies book. For whatever reason, maybe you don't like reading. Maybe reading isn't the format that you prefer. For whatever other reason, maybe you don't want to learn from a book, and so you want to find some kind of online training solution for you. The great thing is now, there are a lot of great online solutions for you. There are so many places you can go and actually learn how to do coding, or basically do any other kinds of tasks in technology. There is just a plethora of them out there now. And the nice part is for the most part, they're relatively inexpensive. Most things out there will cost you less than $50 per month if you have to pay for them, and there are a lot of free options. So the great thing is now is even if you're on a minimum wage salary, you can learn this stuff. Again, when I was learning some of these programming languages back in the day, in order to get any kind of instruction, you had to go to a boot camp, and that boot camp was going to cost you $2,000 to $3,000. And so, when you're talking about $2,000 to $3,000 for some kind of 1 week class in something, that's a big barrier to entry. But if you're simply talking about $50 per month, again, especially if you're in the United States, even if you're at a minimum wage job, you can pay for that. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying it might not be difficult, but that is something that's actually affordable. And so you can go and you can start learning material. One of the things that I will warn you is there are pay-for material out there, and there is free material out there. There's a lot of free material. Like this is free material. But do remember, you kind of, in many ways, you kind of get what you pay for. So if you go and you take some of the free online education out there, you might find that there's gaps in it, or things may be more difficult than you first realize. So if you go out there, again, let's say you're learning coding for me. You're going and you're taking my PHP class or whatever else, right? I am teaching you PHP, or I'm teaching you Arduino development. But that's it. It's just a video, it's the notes below, and then you can figure out the rest. There's no additional component to that education. One of the things, if you go with a company such as Codecademy, you pay Codecademy, is they actually have like this little built-in developer studio. So basically, they tell you what they want you to do in code. You type out the code over in this panel, and in this panel, you get the results. Right, that's really nice. That's the kind of thing that's gonna cost you a few dollars. Additional resources. Again, if you look at Udacity, Udacity is gorgeous. I can't compete with Udacity, right? You go to Udacity, they have what we call in the business world a budget, right? And so, the audio is perfect, and the visuals are perfect, the animation's perfect. It's good. It's what you get when you pay for something, right? And so this is something to think about. I know a lot of people out there, anything online, they don't want to pay for. I'm not going to pay for it. But, at the end of the day, if you're going to pay $50 a month, many times you get things for that $50 a month that are actually valuable. So with that, let's go over to the computer and I can show you a couple of the options that are out there for you with online training, though what I'm going to be showing you today definitely is not the end-all be-all. So one of the places I like to send a lot of people that want to learn coding in the beginning is to Codecademy. So Codecademy has been around for a number of years. If you dealt with Codecademy in the past, it used to be all free. Now it costs some money. But one of the things I like about Codecademy is everything is broken out into a really nice syllabus. They give you the option, again, like you're able to code on one side and the results output in the other. So this can be very important, right? If we go over, we take a look at what their catalog is. So they've got HTML and CSS, Python, JavaScript, Java, SQL, the whole 9 yards. So again, so if you're talking about something like Python, so Python is a scripted language, right? Which means you have to install Python onto whatever server or desktop system that you're going to be using in order to actually be able to code and use Python. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. You have to be able to install Python. You have to make sure permissions and all that are appropriate. You might have to do a bit of troubleshooting. And one of the issues you can run into if you're just trying to figure out how to create variables or whatever in Python, you may not want to have to go through all those additional steps. So one of the nice things here is you simply go on the Python track and you can get dumped in. They explain everything out to you. You code on one side of the screen, it gives you the output on the other, and you go from there. But they've got a lot of different things, again, HTML and CSS, Python, JavaScript, Java, whole 9 yards. And you go over, you take a look at the pricing. Again, they have a little basic thing, gives you some basic courses, $19 a month. Is their fee. And for them, though, I think they want you to sign up for a year. So again, for a full year, it may cost you a little bit of money. But if you can go over, take a look, let's say HTML and CSS, and you can see their different courses. So anything that says pro, that means you're going to have to pay for. So like here with Introduction to HTML, you can click on this. You can scroll down, elements and structures, tables. You can click on start, and then it'll ask you to log in, and you can log in with that. So Codecademy is a pretty good option for a lot of people. Past that, again, you can go over to Udacity. Oh, Udacity is awesome. Udacity is just awesome. You go here, you take a look at their programs. Oh, they have so much. Programming and development, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, data science, business, autonomous systems, the whole 9 yards. They just have an absolutely massive curriculum. Some of the classes are free. Some of them cost money. They have nano degrees. So if you really want to get that certification, you want to get a degree of some sort, you can get this thing called a nano degree. If you go through the whole curriculum and do whatever required, then you get a little stamp that says you know what you're talking about. Udacity is just they are an absolutely phenomenal way to learn things like programming, especially, like I say, if you're trying to learn some of these more complicated things like AI product manager. One of the nice things about them actually charging for their product is that they can then have this type of content created, right? So I'm never going to create AI classes, or probably at least not very sophisticated AI classes, simply because it requires a budget. So since these people have some money behind them, they can do a lot of classes that the free options might not be able to give you. Past that, of course, you've got things like Khan Academy. So Khan Academy, actually, if you go over to courses, they have some basic stuff in computing, so computer programming, computer science, the whole 9 yards. So that may be an option for you. And then finally, there is Udemy. So I actually have some classes on Udemy. Udemy is a bit of a weird one. Basically what Udemy is a marketplace for people who create online education. So I create my videos, I put them onto Udemy, and then I can sell my classes on Udemy. What this means is if you go to Udemy, you might be able to get some classes, so like very specific classes you may not get other places. But the problem is it can be very hit or miss on the quality of education, right? Because basically almost anybody can submit their classes to Udemy. So that means you're going to get some brilliant people and some not so brilliant people. So if you're looking at something like Udemy, just be a little careful about that. But these are some of the options for you. There are more out there. Again, there's lynda.com. Lynda might be a way for you to go. There's a lot of things for you to look at, but these are just some of the basic options. Just remember, in many ways, you are going to get what you pay for. So that's a basic overview of how you can start learning how to code on your own. And again, even if you got the money for a boot camp, even if mommy and daddy are going to pay your full ride through college, I would still highly recommend you at least learn the basics of one programming language, just to verify it's not going to make you lose your mind. Again, if I tell people it takes a special type of personality to be a park ranger or to be a truck driver or to be a firefighter, everybody looks at me and goes, "Of course, Eli. Why are you saying such common sense things?" If I say it takes a certain type of personality to be a coder, Eli, anybody. Haven't you heard anybody can be a coder? It's like, what? It just doesn't make any sense. But it's one of the lies that gets sold. I will warn you, for anybody that's gotten this far in the video, when people start talking about becoming a technology professional, a lot of people are just bold-faced lying on the subject area. Again, if you go to a boot camp, remember the recruiters, whoever's talking to you about signing up for a boot camp, they get paid when you sign the check and the first day your butt goes in the seat. They don't get paid when you get a job. They don't get paid when you decide you like coding. They don't even get paid the first time you upload something to GitHub. They basically get paid when you sign the check. They do not really care whether you succeed or fail. One of the horrible things about our modern education in the United States is the fact of the matter is these colleges genuinely do not care if you succeed. I've been in some conversations literally, deans higher up people in the colleges that have explicitly stated they are not responsible for the outcomes for their students. And these are some very expensive colleges and universities. And so what I will warn you is that some people just are not cut out to be coding. They're not cut out to be in the technology field, just like some people aren't cut out to be park rangers, right? And so I think it's very important is you sit down, you learn one of these languages. I don't care whether it's Python or JavaScript, learn how to create an Android app or an iOS app. And just, again, let me be clear. Yes, it is going to be difficult in the beginning. Obviously, it's going to be stressful. Obviously, it's going to be frustrating. You're starting from square one. But the question is okay, once you've done 2 weeks of this, once you've done a month of this, is this the type of thing where you're like, oh, hey, if I had somebody teaching me how to do this properly, this would actually be kind of fun. Oh, hey, if I had the appropriate resources, this would be kind of fun. Oh, hey, I want to hang around other people that are doing this type of work. That would be kind of fun, right? Do you get done with 2 weeks or a month of self-study and that's how you feel? Or do you get done with a month and go, oh, yeah, mosquitoes don't sound too bad. I think... yeah, park ranger. I think park ranger is for me. So a lot of people, when I talk about maybe you should be a florist, that's one of the jokes I bring up in a lot of my classes and a lot of my videos, and it's not really a joke. Some people are not built to be technology professionals, and that's fine. There is no insult to that. So please self-study, especially before you go to a boot camp. Those boot camps, you drop $20,000, and I mean the results can be brutal. I know. I went through a boot camp for MCSE, so all the way back when standard IT was the big thing, I went through my MCSE NT 4.0 boot camp, and I can tell you there were 26 people in that class, and 2 of us got our MCSEs. Like that's real world, right? So that's something to think about. The final thing I'll just say is a lot of people ask, how long do you need to take to study every day? And again, this, especially with young people, is a big thing. I'm going to study 15 hours a day. As somebody who has been through boot camps, as somebody who has studied for certifications in colleges and all that kind of stuff, let me tell you, no, you are not going to study 15 hours a day. There's only so much information the human brain can process in a day. It varies for everybody, but it's not as much as you think. maybe 3 hours. I think most people can really do about 3 hours of education per day before it all starts leaking out. And again, remember, when this is education in your technology world, it's not about getting to the end. It's not about getting the certificate. It's about knowing what the hell you're doing. So if you sit there and if you read a whole book in an hour, but you retain none of the information, it doesn't matter, because when you go to do your job, you're going to be expected to know whatever it is you put on your resume. So what I would argue with most people is really you can only learn about an hour a day. And now I know some people, calm down, because when I say you can only really learn an hour a day, a lot of people lose their minds. But realize you've got a life to deal with, right? You've got a job, you've got, social life, you have other things. And so even simply setting aside 1 hour a day can be much harder than most people give it credit for, right? If you say, I'm setting aside 10 hours a day, then you sound cool and tough and it sounds good, regardless of whether or not you actually do it, right? Setting aside 1 hour a day can really be a pain in the butt, just carving out that time. But something to think about, if you carve out an hour a day, if you do 1 hour a day of self-study for a year, that's 365 hours. So again, the basics of any of these coding languages, the most it's going to take is about 40 hours, right? To understand the variables, to understand the functions, to understand if, else, all that kind of stuff, right? The base will be about 40 hours. And then to get a little bit more focused on whatever specific functions or specific things that you care about, let's say that's another 40 hours. And that's 80 hours out of a year. So then from there, you build your first app. Now let's say that only takes you about 10 hours, because it should be small. Your first app should be small. Well, that's 90 hours. And then after that, you create a little something bigger, and then a little something bigger. And then you realize, oh, not only do I need Python, but I also need these other things. And so you learn those. And what you'll find, if you spend 1 hour a day, 365 days, just 1 year, you can actually become relatively solid in one programming language. Plus, you can pick up the components of other languages so that you can actually build something useful. And you can actually get much farther than you may first realize. So a lot of people, again, they say, I'm going to do 10 hours a day. To be frank, no, you're not. I've known a couple of people that have actually done it. And they are not what I would call mentally stable human beings. You may want their resume. You would not want their life, if you understand what I'm saying, right? Most people just simply can't do it. It sounds cool. And again, in the technology world, it's not about sounding cool, it's about doing it. So set aside 1 hour a day, every day, whether it's in the morning, whether it's night, just like if you were running or doing exercise, you just set aside that time, you do it every single day. And again, after a year, you'll be surprised how far you get. 1 hour a day over a whole year will get you a hell of a lot farther than 10 hours a day for the 0 days that you actually do it. So something to think about there. So those are some thoughts about how to self-study, how to learn programming, and really anything in technology. As always, I enjoy doing this class. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Apparently, the type of content you just saw is not what Susan W. wants for the future of YouTube. This means that recommendations by YouTube to this channel have dropped massively and views are becoming comically small. I hate to ask. I used to say I would never ask, but if you could subscribe, like, comment, and most importantly, share the videos that you appreciate, that may help slow the death of this channel. Do remember that if anything at all happens to this channel, you can go to EliTheComputerGuy.com to view the content and access information not available on YouTube.